So a little context on me. I have been on the prime contractor side. I have been on the software vendor side. I have been on the subcontractor managing consulting team side, but I have not been on your side in terms of owning a modernization. So I think that's what we'd like to get out of it is some of that. Rick?
Sure. So my name is Rick Smith. I am a program manager at the Department of Justice, and I'm responsible for an application called the Consolidated Debt Collection System. I know that's sort of a mouthful there, but basically this application manages all of the debt that's owed to the federal government that has been litigated by the Department of Justice. So any situation where litigation has occurred and a debt results from that litigation from the Department of Justice, that debt is in my application. The system is about 10 years old now, and so it's in a prime situation for a full modernization. My user community consists of the 94 U.S. attorneys' offices across the country and in Hawaii and Guam, and as well as 6 litigating divisions. My biggest challenge, I think, is trying to get them all to be on the same page at any given moment. And the second challenge is the geographic disbursement of that user community and trying to communicate effectively with that large group.
Thank you, Rick. Jack?
Hi, I'm Jack McCarthy. I'm the CIO for the New Jersey courts. We've been using the Pega products for about 4 years now. Our first program was a rewrite of our municipal court system, which is tickets, parking tickets, speeding tickets, etc. A few years ago, our Chief Justice led a committee to enable criminal justice reform in New Jersey, specifically pretrial release and speedy trial, which we have a breakout session we'll talk about later. That legislation went into effect, and January 1st, we had to have all of our applications up and running for it. About 2 years ago, we decided, since we had already started the municipal court work with Pega, we would continue that work into this sea change in criminal justice, and so now we're done, ahead of time, which is fantastic, and I like to thank myself for getting that done a lot.
Stress level, perhaps?
Yeah, and now we're just waiting to get to January 1st and hope the product works.
Thank you, Jack. Wes?
My name is Wes Johnson. I'm the Deputy Executive Director in Philadelphia. I work for the U.S. Treasury. And in Philadelphia, what we do is we process, I'm going to bring that over here. We process all of the post-payment activity. So we, in the fiscal service, in payment management, disperse 1.3 billion payments every year. And that totals about $3 trillion, a little more than $3 trillion. When payments go awry, we take care of it in Philadelphia, and we make sure the payment goes to the right place at the right time. Our adventure started when I joined, actually. We decided to take 5 legacy systems and merge them into one post-payment system, and the foundation for that post-payment system is Pega. So we designed it around a case management tool, also to be able to provide that coordination among the data that had been widely dispersed before. So that's our effort, and oh, by the way, speeding tickets, New Jersey, you and I need to talk. I need your card.
Alrighty, so the goal of the panel is to enable you gentlemen to share your opinions and your experiences with the audience, so that the audience is able to take something back based on what you have to offer. I'm going to organize the panel around themes. We're going to do 4 themes. The first one's going to be around timeline and scope. Second one around methodology. Third, partnering and enablement. And then fourth and finally, we'll do thinking differently, maybe to reduce risk. But how have you done something that's outside of the formal disciplines that we're going to talk about in the first 3 to think differently? So starting with timeline and scope. I'm going to have each of you address this question, but I'll start with Jack. So most recognize a modernization as a marathon, but is the key to a modernization to establish early and often victories, smaller incremental successes? And if yes, how do you do this? How have you enabled your marathon to be broken into smaller parts?
So when we were in the green room in the back, we decided not to answer any of your questions. Treat it like a debate.
This is debate season. We did agree to this.
That's right. Now, we obviously had a huge project in front of us when this came. It was 2 years with a hard deadline of January 1st to get this done. What we did was we literally sat down and broke the project into as many pieces as we could. Anything that became more complex than a 2 to 3 month effort became a new project, and we brought a new team in to work on it. Fortunately, in New Jersey, I have a pretty large team of individuals, team of programmers. Unfortunately, at the time, we had about 4 people that knew Pega. So we knew we were going to bring in some contracted resources to get this done, but what we looked at was how can we take those couple people that knew the project along with our contractors and then keep splitting them up and seeding them into new projects. Anything that we could push off into other agencies, we did. So our very quick timeline is you get fingerprinted in the LiveScan system, which is a law enforcement system. They send us that record. We then absorb that record into the complaint, allowing the police officer to not have to retype all that information in. It's about 50-something data fields. Behind the scenes, there's a lot of linking and work that we're doing for identification off of that fingerprint record. But once we had that, then our normal process flows through. Probable cause occurs, the decision made, whether it's a summons or warrant. Once that decision's made, then we kick it over to the judge side where they're making that release decision. We had to capture the case management around that release, including running an automated risk assessment, which when I agreed to do this 2 years ago was, okay, let's type some information into a screen and it spits out a score. It has since become a completely automated risk assessment based on that fingerprint where when somebody clicks a button, up pops the score, and we'll show that later at our breakout. That's the easy part of criminal justice reform. The hard part is now, once somebody's in jail and they're determined to stay there, you have 90 days to indict, 180 days to get them to trial. And from the system side, that was pretty easy for us to do. We just need a system that captures dates. From a business side, it's much harder to do, and that's where the business is struggling. One of the things that I think we've been very good at on the IT side is saying, as those topics would come up in meetings and people would think, how are we going to fix the fact that we don't have enough judges? Well, that's not our problem from the IT side. That's one of the few problems that aren't ours. So let's concentrate on fixing the workflow process. And as I mentioned, we broke it down into smaller and smaller pieces, and I actually have a poster-sized piece of paper in my office that started with 6 pieces, and it became 31 pieces. And so one of the things we were allowed to do with that was bring the whole organization in. So as a new piece popped up, we were actually getting volunteers where people recognize this Pega project's going somewhere in our organization, I want to learn about it, and so they would look to get early training, get involved, and we could give them a piece of the project so everybody had buy-in.
Rick, how about you? Small victories? You mentioned a 10-year system.
Yes.
Have you established smaller victories?
Yeah, I think we have. So before we could sort of establish our timeline and our scope, one of the things we wanted to do was to go out and visit a couple of U.S. attorneys' offices, and the whole development team was completely on board with this idea, and everybody wanted to go until they realized that we weren't going to Hawaii, we were going to Baltimore. We still managed to get a few team members to come along, and what we did there was 2 things. One, we tried to understand how they're using the system right now. After 10 years' time, people evolve and they figure out ways to use the system that you haven't thought of. And the other thing we found out was what are the things that they're doing that they have to work around what you built in order to get their job done. And so we wanted to find out those things as well. And that was a very useful trip. It allowed us to drive what is the basic framework of the new application that we're now building. The other thing we did was we thought, maybe this wasn't our first time doing this. We've done other modernizations before, so we thought maybe this time around we should try this on ourselves first. So we tried Pega on a piece of the application that is only internal to our own organization, and this was invaluable to us because it gave us really clear insights into, how the tool works and how to and what kind of methodology would work effectively for us.
Great, thank you. Wes, how about you?
Yeah,
incremental successes?
Yeah, when we did our cost benefit analysis for the system, we sold it early on by shutting down many of those 5 systems, in fact, all of those 5 systems that I talked about. And so as we pieced those out and parsed those out, those wins all seemed to be at the year 4, year 5, year 6 portion of the implementation. So we knew that we had those successes that we were targeting as we went forward, but as we looked at scope further, we tried to identify something early on that we could have as a win. One of the things that we were able to do that was very unique is that because of these disparate systems and what heretofore had been disparate dispersing centers, all of the data finally was going to be resident in one spot in this location with our Pega build. And we were able to get that to happen right away in the first year. So what we did is we tried to think innovatively and tried to think what could we do with this data that we've never done before. And we started looking for fraudulent payments, improper payments. And so in that first year, we partnered with the Treasury OIG as well as a number of other OIGs. We were able to identify very quickly and create a methodology for identifying fraudulent payments in that data set, setting up little Pega cases to help us manage it, and then moving it forward to the point where we could have funds recovery. Treasury OIG reported out last year that we helped them create 200 convictions, and that we recovered about $30 to $40 million. And that win alone has helped to keep the project going because we're able to say to everybody that we're self-funding. And so it was this little creative win up front with some aspect of the system that we enabled early on to be able to now parse it out and keep it going.
Thank you. Switching to methodology, this question is going to be for Rick, you first, and then we'll go to Jack. If you're looking to modernize, do you need to change the way that you build systems? Do you need to change the methodology? Right now we see a lot of teams trying to move towards an Agile approach. And where does your team fall on the Agile to Waterfall to Big Bang scale? What have you seen? What do you think about methodology?
So when we started, we were very excited to try the Agile methodology. We hadn't done it before. We were basic Waterfall all the way. And so when we started with the functionality that we were building just for ourselves in the beginning, we did use it, and it worked great. We had a very distinct product owner, and we were able to move very quickly through the process, and it was terrific. Then we got to the larger user community, those 94 district offices and those 6 litigating divisions who all had different opinions and thoughts and approaches to how they do business, and we hit a wall. So we didn't really want to abandon Agile completely, but we knew that with all of those different user communities, having one product owner just wasn't in the cards for us, at least not in the beginning. So we ended up with a sort of a hybrid approach, where we tried to take some of the good features out of Agile that really worked for us, and like splitting things up into very small pieces. But also using Waterfall where it was just necessary for us because we needed more time to get through some of the design and requirement steps. So what we ended up with was we took our team, we split them into two parts. One part was called Discovery, and those folks were responsible for making sure that they understood all of the user requirements from all of the different diverse user groups. And they were able to bring that together in a cohesive approach and design. Then the other group was all about development. And they would take what was created or defined in Discovery and do the development work. And this kind of worked because it gave us some speed where we weren't just simply doing one step, then the next step, then the next step. Because what we had done was we had broken the project into the smaller increments. So we decided we would phase the project. So there's 4 phases to it. And then within each phase, we've broken it down into smaller chunks. And so we do discovery on a small chunk, and then development. And then while that's going on, we're starting discovery on the next small chunk, and so on and so forth. And then when the development is done, we loop back and we do user testing on that piece that's done. But we don't release it. That's kind of the difference between, I think, one of the differences between Agile and the way we did it. So at the end of the phase, we then release everything. So we're in this right now. So and it's going pretty well. We will deliver the first phase probably at the end of December.
Have you coined a new term for this methodology? Practical Agile?
We hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
That might be the next step.
Yeah.
Jack, how about you and your team? What have you seen in terms of methodology?
So we had a similar experience. Our initial municipal court rewrite started with 100% Pega resources, over 6 slivers down to 0% with us taking on all the work. And we probably achieved that somewhere around phase 3-ish. The Pega guys were out, we were doing it our own way. We had this project looming in front of us. What we were finding was a severe resistance to the Pega way of doing stuff. We were trying, but between the business and IT and Pega, it wasn't meshing in the judiciary. I guess, unfortunately for Pega, we ran out of money and didn't continue to bring in their resources at those rates. And we were faced with, at that point, we have to do this ourselves. So we got a team enabled and said, go. And they would come back and say, well, if I cut this corner, I can do it this way. If I cut this corner, I can do it this way. The end result was we got the project done, got it done very quickly. It was a 9-month effort. We did it in about 5 months. And so we recognized there was a lot of value in doing it in the Pega way. It's just for our organization at that moment, we weren't there yet. So we started doing it our way, and that's the term I'll coin. It was our way with a goal of getting to their way. And we've probably in the last 2 years maybe moved the bar from 60% our way, 40% where we wanted to go. We probably moved it up 10 to 15%. So we are achieving the complete use of the tool, which gains all the efficiencies that you want in your development environment and drives down costs. We're not there yet, and from where our organization came from, we're light years from where we came from, but we still have a little way to go, and we know we want to get there. So every time we bring staff in to get trained, bring resources in to train our staff, it just moves us another step in the direction that we know we ultimately want to get.
Rick, there's a story around Department of Justice in terms of there's an example of true Agile, there's an example of true Waterfall, and you guys are somewhere in the middle. Do you think that's helpful to see those other organizations within your own department and what Jack was saying, our way and their way, and really have that reference point? Have you seen that?
I feel like within our organization, it's mostly Waterfall at this point, and Agile is a relatively new concept, and I think we're probably sort of on the leading edge, and everybody's kind of watching us to see how it goes. And like I said, so far it's going pretty well. My goal here is to get us all the way there. I think once we get the initial implementation in place, and we're biting off smaller chunks, and we're doing enhancements and things like that, I think we'll get there.
Let's switch our theme to partnering and enablement. You touched on this a little bit, Jack, but let me direct this question to you, Wes. What type of team do you need to accomplish a modernization? How do you successfully partner, and or how do you enable your team for this marathon? What have you seen and what are your experiences?
Yeah, we have a very interesting context. We work with 11,000 financial institutions, 250 agencies, as well as we have a fiscal agent that helps connect us to the banking system. So for us, partnering was critical. It was part and parcel to everything we had to do with this system. And as we started to look at the design as to how we were going to approach the design, we realized that all of these various stakeholders really had not just a vested interest or a partial interest, but they really were a part and parcel to what we had to do. They were fully integrated with us. So early on, even when we were still designing the system itself, we were engaging all of these partners. Now, we were not going to do the development. Again, we hand this over to a fiscal agent to do this on our behalf. And so the oversight of that to try to make sure that what we learned from our partners, our customers, and the people with whom we integrate, our agencies, their needs were met at the same time that we were trying to enable and create and bring the design to life. To kind of touch a little bit on the last issue a little bit, I think one of the things I would recommend is take the time as you would in a waterfall approach to make sure that you have a very, very comprehensive design up front, and then marry yourself to that. Be true to that design. We started with a waterfall approach. We had a design. We then went to Agile, and I think that our fiscal agent kind of swung the pendulum from way over here to way over here. And one of the things that we're experiencing right now is some of the pieces that would have been caught in waterfall but would have led to more of a big bang type introduction may have been left off the table, and now we're trying to backfit them. The analogy I would use would be something similar to a car. We developed great tires, we've got an engine, we've got a chassis. Transmission? What do you mean transmission? And so, and why do you need a transmission? And now we have to talk about why our customers we've engaged do that. So you have to maintain that close relationship with all of your partners. But again, as I said before, I think it's really staying true to the design, in that when you get your customers to buy in, you get your partners to buy in, you get your integrator to buy in, stay true to that, because that comprehensive and cohesive design that you design up front, whether you take it an Agile approach or Waterfall approach, is critical to ensuring that your partnership relationships are not harmed through that process.
So Wes, let's stay right there for a minute. Is that a culture consideration of having to have the big picture up front? And an Agile methodology might not necessarily have that? And so you establish a level of comfort as you transition a methodology?
Yeah, I think that really is true. I think if you are developing a small thing where everybody can kind of get their arms around it, Agile is an easier approach. I think when we're looking at, let's say, for example, Social Security has very specific needs in our integration with them. If we don't take all of that into consideration, as well as all the other 250 agencies, when we're developing a certain sprint, if you will, then you run the risk of, when you come to final integration, that you've upset one of your partners. So I think it really is cultural. I think that you need to take that holistic view, especially when you're dealing with tons of partners. And once you've satisfied that group as a whole, stick to it, because I think that if you parse out pieces and forget something, you really do run afoul in upsetting one of your partners in the system.
Jack, did you see the same? You talked briefly about your partnering that you did up front and how you transitioned due to funding, but it seems like you might have a similar culture request when it comes to enabling them.
Yeah, we recognized very early that if we were going to have success not only in our current project, but going forward, we had to enable our staff. And so we spent the equivalent of probably what we would have spent on one contractor. We held, I don't know, what, about 6 boot camps, Tom, ish. We've held about 6 boot camp sessions, bringing in 25 staff members for training every time. And that just allowed, our staff to slowly become enabled. Obviously, we need to partner them with resources. We're fortunate enough that we have a few companies within the Trenton area that we can draw from and bring in resources. But our real goal is to enable our staff, because that'll help us for the long term. One of the things that we are all faced with in government is we're not paying the same salaries as the private sector a lot of time. And so when you do enable staff on these great new technologies, they leave. We recognize that. We know it's going to happen. So as I bring in new staff, and what we found is we've had a lot of success with brand new staff coming into the organization, training them on Pega and getting a good few years out of them, versus the long-term hardcore Java programmers that might resist it a little bit. They know the better way to do it. Sometimes it's easier to teach the new dog the new tricks, and so we've had a lot of success with that. And I recognize they may leave in a few years, but if I get a couple good years, rather hire them, give them some quick training, and then put them to work, and then get that couple good years out of them. With all the pension talk and all the things that have been going on in government, we aren't going to see the 30 to 40 years employees anymore. I just don't see that happening. So I'm probably one of the last, this panel's probably the last group of that. But by, hiring good people, we still pay very competitive salaries at the bottom. Once you get experience, if you want to go elsewhere, use me as a reference. But, at least I get you for a couple of years.
So you will continue to enable your team then? You found that as your highest probability of success to do it that way? Okay.
So far.
For the last theme, let's talk about thinking differently. So this is more free form in terms of what are unique and different ways, and we've talked a little bit about culture. So what is counterculture that you've done in your teams, in your programs, to be able to achieve these victories, something that you haven't done previously in your current implementations? Let's go down the line. Rick, starting with you.
Okay, so I was just thinking about the partnering thing, and our user community wanted to partner with us, but they also wanted to do our part of the job as well. So we would share with them the new screens and the prototypes, and they would come back with, well, could you just move this field here, and could you put that field there and this field, and move this over like that, and put this line here. And what we realized was they were trying to recreate the old screens they already had. And so we had to take a step back, and we had to think about that for a minute and say, okay, well, why are they trying to do that? Why aren't they on board with this whole new approach? And I learned from, I think the guy was a psychologist or something, and he said, people talk about change and how difficult it is to change from one thing to another. And he said, it isn't about the change, it's about loss. People are afraid of what they're going to lose. They're not so afraid of going from this to that, but what am I losing in that process? And so we had to kind of step back and say, okay, let's call this group in and let's talk about that. So we brought them in, and sure enough, they had a lot to share. I'm afraid I'm going to lose the capability to do X, or I need to do this thing over here, and your new screens, they don't do that, and I absolutely have to have that. And we wrote a few things down, and we've now tried to keep all those things in mind as we're developing the new screens. They may not look the same, and they may not function exactly the same as they did before, but they meet the need, and they help the user community to sort of take it down a notch and have a little bit of faith in us that we know what we're doing, and we're going to deliver a solution that's better than what they have now.
Have you changed the tone to be able to present this is why you're not losing anything? Low loss that's interesting. I haven't heard it referred to that way before. Yeah. But it seems like you might want to present a little bit differently when interacting with this community if if the point you're trying to make is you're not going to lose anything.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, we had to sort of come at it from that angle. We also used an interesting analogy. I walked into a meeting one day, and in one hand I had a flip phone, and in the other hand I had an iPhone. And I said, so, you know, when we're talking about the legacy system that we have today, this is how that works. It's like a flip phone. You can, you know, it does a couple of things really good, and that's it. And if you wanted to do something else, it's going to take years to develop it. Now, this is an iPhone, right? This is kind of what Pega's like. It's a platform, and you can add and take away functionality, you know, as frequently and as easily as you like. And I said, that's where we are headed. And we need you guys as partners. We need you to come along with us. But you need to trust us as well that, you know, when we build the applications that fit on the iPhone, you know, they're going to be the best they can be. So we kind of, it sort of worked, and then one of them pulled out a flip phone and said, "This is mine."
It's in their pocket.
I'm
still.
like, "Oh no!"
Didn't work on that person.
No, not that guy.
Jack, I know you have a great story of reducing the negativity in your organization, and that being a starting point for your modernization. Can you tell us a little bit of that story?
It's simply saying yes. When you have an opportunity to, when the Chief Justice came to us and said, I want to create this risk assessment system, can you do it? The answer was yes. You know, we knew we could do it. We knew we had the ability to do it, and we wanted to keep our jobs. And you know, anytime the chief asks us for something, we do it. I've been fortunate enough to attend the last few Gartner symposiums, and there's been a few great keynote speakers that all sum up. You know, we all work in IT, and we have this amazing ability to get things done if we have the right tools. And as long as the tool is capable of doing it, our answer should always be yes. Dan Smith and I were driving down from New Jersey yesterday, and he had the perfect slogan for this. So I'm going to give him credit for it, but it was think it, do it. You know, if somebody can think something up, we can do it. And there's very little that we can't do in this day and age with the exponential growth and processing power and the analytics and algorithms. And as long as somebody can think something up, there is a way to do it. And if we start with the idea of yes, we can do it, and not go into an approach where we're saying no, we can't. I used to have programmers quoting court rules on why we couldn't do things. And I'm like, well, first, that's not your job. Your job is to get it done. The lawyer's job is to tell us why we can. And I've got a lawyer, you know, that is a colleague of ours that'll change the court rules for us. So you just worry about getting it done, you know. And so, you know, anytime we've run into hurdles within our court rules, we've been able to work with the Supreme Court, change the court rules to allow us to modernize into the new technology. So it all starts with just creating that culture of yes, yes, we can do things, and as Dan said, think it, do it.
Have you done anything to advertise that or to promote that throughout the organization? It seems like a great concept, but how do you make that the new norm?
I think our main thing is, you know, during presentations, we're fortunate in New Jersey, we have annual meetings where we bring all the managers in, and yes, we bring the staff in and get their opinions and create these good ideas, but it's just showing people, you know, the great things you can do. Pointing, you know, we've all been to presentations where they read every single field on the screen, and, you know, they're not telling us about the great processing power in the back. And it's really just, you know, constantly keeping that positive attitude. Right now in New Jersey with criminal justice reform, everybody's super busy. And people will catch me in the elevator and they're like, oh, I bet you're busy. And then all of a sudden they sigh like, you know, and they almost want to take the burden from me. I was like, listen, we're done. Life's good, you know, move on. That was our other thing we learned this week at the Gartner Symposium, life is good. So the whole great presentation
Think it,
about
do it.
that.
Life is good. Yes, culture.
Yeah, I just have to come up with the T-shirts.
There you go. Wes, how about you? Unique ways of thinking about this journey?
Yes, I love the yes, do it. You know, I mentioned before that when we got our data set together, we came up with a new service. We came up with a new idea of something we could add value by having this fraud interdiction, fraud identification, fraud pursuit. And one of the things as we started working with the IGs through our customer agencies is that we became acutely aware that the power that we were bringing to the table with this new development and this new system, and having both an Oracle backend and a Greenplum backend, so we could do multiple parallel processing as well as transactional processing. When we designed that, that's exactly what we designed it for, but we designed it for our purposes. And as we started reaching out to our customers, one of the things that we began to realize is that many of our large customers, VA, IRS, Social Security, they have currently what I would call, in real estate terms, mid-century fixer-uppers for systems, right? These were systems that were developed last century, and I know that makes them sound really old, and in many cases they are, but what it really means is that they're hamstrung, they are curtailed by the power of the system that was developed years ago. What we offered up when we took this data set and we now created a space where we could make it available to them is we were enabling them to do the process of their own analysis on our machine for them. So we provided them with capabilities through our systems that they didn't have. And today when, let's say, Social Security makes a request, many times it takes them weeks before they get their data and answer back. Today, using our payment data, they can get that answer back in minutes, seconds many times. And so I think this thinking outside the box or thinking differently, in other words, it's not just our data for our purposes, but this collective set of data will help our customers is really a unique one, because we allow for them to help supplement for deficiencies in their own systems. And not to say that their systems are bad, but there's only so much money. We can only spend so much money bringing things together. And if we're the new kid on the block with the more powerful tool, what we decided is we wanted to make that available to everybody else so they could play with the new toy without having to invest themselves.
It's an interesting concept of transparency. That's not something that we think about a lot when it comes to either funding, ownership of data. Is that what you're seeing, that transparency is promoting your successes?
Yeah, transparency, and you know, not thinking of this as our system, like Treasury system, but thinking of this as our system collectively, and recognizing that they can't go out and build their own. And so, you know, it's really interesting, because by allowing us to help them look through the data, and I'm just going to stick in the fraud space because it's kind of interesting. You know, you guys may find this odd, but when a bad guy starts stealing from the IRS, they don't just steal from the IRS because they're not just a one-stop shop, right? I mean, they try to steal from everybody. And so we're all in this together. We as partners are all in this together, not just us as agencies, but also my banking institution partners. They're being violated by these criminals as well. And so by helping us have this view of, gee, you know, grandma's identity has been stolen, she's had an issue with her Social Security check, everybody should have a heightened alert that other things may transpire around this individual or around this type of activity is huge, because it's transparency, it's sharing of functionality, and it's actually sharing of value.
So with 1 minute left, Rick, do you see transparency in your organization? It's an interesting theme that I hadn't thought of, but Wes bringing it up. Transparency should enable greater buy-in. It should enable quicker successes. Have you seen that at all?
I have seen that. I think that's something that is basic to the way we approach the projects that we work on. I think you have to be open, and I think you have to share the information that you have, and you have to share the technology. We have a ways to go in terms of some of the functionality and capabilities that we need for our current system, and we have tapped into some of the other financial systems that are used within the DOJ, and those guys are very forthcoming with help and assistance, and kind of showing us how to get to where we really want to be. And they've already been there, and so they've sort of blazed that trail for us. And then we do the same with them. So I think I think there is that, and I think it works.
Well, gentlemen, I thank you very much for this panel. I think we have 3 new T-shirts that you can go out and publish, Jack. First one is Low Loss. Thank you, Rick, for that one. Second is Think It, Do It. And then finally, Practical Agile is a new form of methodology. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.